Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because it is really amazing to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is Mud City. Yeah, okay. So, just getting started, I've been hard at work on my Jubilee series, and I was hoping to get something out this week, and I'm still going to try by the end of the week. And just to kind of show you what I've been doing is and this is the archive on ProQuest for Baltimore Sun. I've been going through every issue of the Sun for that week, looking for Jubilee-related articles. I found a story in there that is really kind of amazing to me, and so we're going to start that story by noting today's date, which is September 11th. And I'm not going to talk about the anniversary of what happened in New York. There'll be another time and place and video for that. But while I was doing my read-throughs, I found this article from September 11th, 2006, and so 113 years ago, it got to be 94 degrees. The weather yesterday was more like a midsummer than the sort that might be expected so near the middle of September. Temperatures jumped to 80 as early as 9 a.m., at noon it was 90, and by 2:30 it was 94. And now just to contrast that with today's weather forecast for Baltimore, right? And it's really similar. By 11, it was almost 80. By 2, it was almost 90. And by 5, almost 93. And now with heat indexes and so on and so forth, this could actually be high. It could be lower as well, but they could get higher. It could match the same temperatures as 113 years ago. So, again, when you look for coincidences or non-coincidences as it is, that's kind of coincidental, right? But not enough, really, I thought, to make like a video on it. It just was sort of interesting to me that today's weather matched so closely the same weather as during the Jubilee. And so as I was continuing my research, actually before I found that, I found this article, which was Death in London's Heat, Sunstroke, Prostration, and Terribly Heavy Infant Mortality. Right? Many drowned themselves. It's interesting, the infants didn't drown themselves, right? They were driven mad by the sun's rays. They sought relief that way by drowning themselves. Lunacy reports are disquieting. And now the beginning of the article talks about how there was the heat wave had broken, right? But that even in August, there was like a coolness in August, and men had overcoats on and stuff, right? But by late August and September, right, the glorious summer with its abnormal heat has had its gloomy side as well. It has not been all in sunstroke and prostration. Numerous as lately have been the cases in the hospitals, for according to this week's return of the Registrar General, during the last fortnight, nearly 1,000 children, mostly under 1 year old, have died. Right? The terrors of disease. The figures are most remarkable, for about 40% of all the deaths are considered due to troubles of infancy. Since the last week of July, the weekly deaths among children from this cause have mounted in an extraordinary degree. Starting with 74, they increased to 184, 288, 424, 458, and last week we're at 555. The doctors are quite unable in South and East London in particular to cope with the numbers of illnesses from summer sickness, some having as many as 200 cases on their books. Right, 3 kids died in one family and 2 more in another. This disease makes rapid progress. Even strong children dying within 48 hours after the first attack. Summer sickness, they call this. Many were driven mad. Another sad result of the heat has been the large number of persons who have been driven mad by the heat wave and sought relief by drowning themselves. A most disquieting volume for the British reader is the 60th report of the commissioners in lunacy. From this it would appear that lunacy is increasing in the British Isles in a most alarming fashion, while the cost of maintaining the pauper lunatics appears to be rapidly mounting out of all proportion to the numerical increase. As showing what a burden they are to the British ratepayers, one finds from the report that 122,000 persons were detained last year at a cost of 15 shillings a week each, every penny of which had to be found by the efficient members of the community. In less than 50 years, the number of the insane has more than trebled. From 36,000 in 1859, it has risen to 122,000, an increase which is parallel to the recent increase in the unemployed and paupers. An important section of the report deals with the question of how far insanity is due to heredity. The number of cases which can be definitely ascribed to this cause is given at about 1/4 of the total. So again, roughly like 30,000, is due to heredity. So there's 90 some thousand to find. One startling feature of the report is the annual some 8,000 persons are discharged from asylums as nominally recovered. Such persons, as known from experience, being a source of danger of contamination to the public. You let those crazy people out and they're going to make more crazy people. But over and above this is the large number of patients set into freedom every year not recovered. They say over 1,800 of such last year they sent out willingly unrecovered, just kicked them out, right? So it's interesting that the headline connects the insanity and to the heat and the sun's rays, but the actual body of the article itself talks about unemployment and being poor and hereditary as the concerns. But very interesting. And so that article got my attention, especially when I saw how hot it was in 1906 here on September 11th, right? And then in the very same issue, September 9th, I found this article, Making Weather to Order, Daring Schemes of Bold Scientists. All right, so Professor Willis Moore, chief of the government meteorological department at Washington, has recently announced that it will soon be possible, owing to the great advances in the system, any methods of observation, to forecast the weather a long way ahead. All right, so this is what he talks about, like the instruments that are being invented and how predicting the weather is going to be. It's kind of like what our meteorologists do today, right? Ultimately, he hopes to be able to predict the weather for a whole year ahead, right? Professor Moore's attempt is but another added to many attempts made by scientists to control this fickle weather of ours. Right? It is not many years since a celebrated scientist, and I have to wonder if this celebrated scientist is Tesla, made known to the world a scheme by which any kind of climate could be made to order. The only point against his plan was that it required a few $100 million to make the experiment. His plan was to alter the Earth's axis. It is well known that the differences of climate we experience are due to the angles at which the sun's rays strike the Earth. For example, the cold in the Arctic regions is not because of the Earth's distance from the sun. Indeed, we are 40 million miles near Old Sol in winter than we are in the summer, but his rays, so to speak, glance off the Earth's surface. Now, if we could only alter the angle at which the Earth is poised in space, we could change the climate. Moreover, if we had the Earth completely under control and could regulate its position as it revolves around the sun, we could modify the fearful heat of the tropics and transform Greenland's icy mountains and barren wastes into tree-covered surfaces and verdant plains, so that it all depends upon changing the axis of the Earth. And I think it's interesting, in today with the climate change and global warming and all of that, right here in 1906, they actually want Greenland to be ice-free, right? They think it's a good idea then, right? Because to obtain this desirable end, right, M. Fouche rhymes with Vice President of the French Astronomical Society, suggested a few years back that a vast ditch should be dug at the equator line and continued right around the globe. The waters of the ocean would then be let into the ditch. Should this not bring about the right poise of the Earth and a correspondingly correct climate, the ditch would be enlarged at certain places until the end aimed at was attained. John Jacob Astor, the millionaire, was at one with M. Fouche, except that he believed the Earth's axis would be changed more satisfactorily by digging the ditch in the neighborhood of the North Pole. Mr. Astor, however, refrained from sinking any of his millions into the scheme. Of course, the plan, theoretically, is right enough, so in theory they believed that they could do this, although obviously impossible to put it into practice. Another theory, formulated by a well-known electrical engineer, whom conspicuously named Free, is by comparison quite practical. A practical idea for controlling the weather, 1906. His idea is to encircle the globe with a giant cable through which would be sent a current of electricity strong enough to overcome the present magnetic poles of the Earth. This would give us a new north and new south pole and would cause our planet to lean violently toward the sun, whenever desired to do so, because as the spectrum reveals, the chief constituent of that luminary is iron. In a word, the sun would attract the Earth by magnetism. Now, do they still believe that the sun is iron today? I don't know. I haven't done any research on that, but that's amazing, right? To generate the necessary electricity would require that the water at the Falls of Niagara or Zambales be harnessed to drive the mammoth turbines. A force of 1 million horsepower has been considered sufficient. The huge dynamos necessary would not be beyond the powers of modern engineers, while all that need to be done to girdle the globe would be to unite 60 ordinary cables and stretch them around the Earth. Right? Very practical, 60 cables stretched around the Earth. And now who's to say that they didn't do something like this with undersea cables and, just burying the cable around whatever the equator would be, whether the Earth is a globe or not. They could do something like that. I think that plan is absolutely amazing, but it gets even better, right? Because on the very next day, okay, so again, 113 years ago today, in the Baltimore Sun, in a letter to the editor, it states thusly: municipal ownership of the clouds, right? In view of the fact that the weather has been preposterously bad during the last 2 years in this immediate neighborhood, especially during the summer months, involving much suffering and inconvenience to the people of Baltimore, you will confer a favor upon a long-suffering public if you will engage that stalwart advocate, Mr. George Stuart Brown, in an active campaign for the municipal ownership of the clouds. So, that's amazing in and of itself, that someone would write in to the Sun asking for, this George Stuart Brown to create municipal ownership of the clouds. And so first I wanted to find out who George Stuart Brown was, right? And so he was a judge at the United States Custom Court and a member of the Board of General Appraisers, right? He was born August 16th, 1871 in Baltimore, and he received an Artium Baccalaureus degree in 1893 from Johns Hopkins University. Right, he received a Bachelor of Law in 1895 from the University of Maryland Law School, and he served on the Baltimore City Council from 1899 to 1907. So he was on the City Council. So our writer here, J.R., whoever he is, right, was writing for a member of the Baltimore City Council to take municipal ownership of the clouds. So, but what does that mean? What is municipal? All right, so it's of, relating to, or characteristic of a municipality. And a municipality is primarily an urban political unit having corporate status and usually powers of self-government. So this guy, George Stuart Brown, goes to Johns Hopkins University, and Johns Hopkins University has intimate ties today with NASA. NASA news from Johns Hopkins University, right? The true colors of Pluto, Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, which is here in Maryland, right? They're working on this Titan project, which is going to send some sort of rover to Titan, right? So who owns the clouds? I bet Johns Hopkins owns the clouds, or NASA does through Johns Hopkins. It's pretty unbelievable, given the state of the climate change debate and global warming and weather manipulation and, Operation Popeye and, Hurricane Dorian and all that other stuff. So I just kind of thought that this was an amazing story to come to in just a couple days' time, corresponding with the week of the Jubilee, 1906. And I wanted to share that with you guys because I don't know, I just really love that. And I think again, I'm kind of dumbfounded by it. I did not see this one coming today. So that's what I have for you today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And until the next one, cheers.